Welcome to the deserted medieval town of Newtown Jerpoint. A quick presentation produced by me, Daniel O'Mahony, a PhD student from UCD. This presentation will basically involve a combination of history, archaeology and folklore with contributions from owner and manager of Jerpoint Park along with his wife Maeve, Joe O Connell, and myself included a little bit here and there, and yeah, that's about it. Enjoy.
Now, folks, that field there behind the church stood a very, very wealthy town. Started in the 12th century, died out in the 16th century. And when we bought the place here, we didn't know. And the main reason for that, we didn't want to know. We just loved the place, and the was wasn't to be looked into too much, kind of. But we were here a very short length of time when the National Monuments and the Heritage Council, the OPW, the County Council, were invited to a meeting in Kilkenny with them all. Everyone but God was there. And to tell us that we're one of the most important heritage sites in Ireland. And their main focus was, don't do damage. You know, now we got it so keen when we realised like that preserved by the National Monuments like it's fairly serious stuff. And that we had no interest in at the time. But as we got over it, the Heritage Council were wonderful to us. Like they drove the delay, and we went for the ride with them. But the first thing we done with the history written is this here. Lie down. So that's the next way the field as it is today. Now with this then we got an artist to copy this onto this. Now you're standing here in the 14th century. Say next to the church here beside us. The abbey here. And do you see where the sheep are below at the very bottom? That's where that was. Now the name of the area is Jerpoint. And Jerpoint is Latin, and what it means is the crossing of the river. You'd imagine the name would come from here, but it's actually about the bridge. In case you think tolls are new, there was a toll on that in the 14th century, and nothing is new. Now the people that planned and built this in the 12th century, highly intelligent people. There was observed by half the country because they just got it right. But the biggest problem here at the north, there wasn't any. So with that in mind, you could be attacked by anyone at any time. So there's the River Nore here, so they can't be attacked from this side. They have a small river here, which is okay for security, but perfect for the waterways. Right at the bottom of town, like there was one on the far side for the monastery, and two here. It was high enough that it never flooded, and all the big storms came in this way. So they were up as the flood, they were down as the storm. They had all the protection they possibly could have, and a lovely bit of energy. Now, they knew what they were about. They knew exactly what they were about. So that's that, we won of it. Now, this is the hunt cemetery. There's no money hunts in here. These are people that have the money and they're their own private burial ground. But this stone here, now the lily coming from the cross, what it means is the resurrection, new life coming from the cross. Now that was cut in 1830. There's nobody alive that could do that. Nobody. You know, I could imagine if I was doing it and having any finish, I'd probably break off a leaf and have to start again. Because that's a real work of art. And the principle is new life coming from the cross. That's what it's about. And this one here, there's 8 flowers, 2 in each corner. But you take an awful lot better hand than mine to put on a piece of paper once. This fella put it in rock 8 times because they are exactly the same. Now, do you see the laurel wreath? You see it in the Roman films, you see it in the Olympics. What's it stand for? Victory. So this guy has a victory over death. This guy is going to rise again, and I'm going to wait and see. And there is no hurry in finding out, but we will find out. So, and the tombs there now, the bodies are under the ground. I think the tomb was only to show off the wealth. Now, these stones here, they look like a mess. They're all over the place, but they're not. They're far from it. This is back now, starting 12th century. Every stone there is coded. And when they're coded, there's no 2 stones in the graveyard the same shape. So if I knew the shape of your family stone, I could find the grave. and the height of the stone gave your standing in society. And now they were reading and writing at the time, there's not any doubt about that. And but this is the system they used. Now it was a good system because in a closed community everyone knew which stone represented which family. You know, and that's the way it went on. Next one. Now the symbols on this. You see the moon, the sun, meaning the beginning and the end. The fleur de lis, which makes it French. Now on the French flag, how you know the French flag, you see the duck's head. That's the French flag. Now you have the Trinity knot here. You have the Maltese cross, which makes it the Crusaders. And the writing is in Latin. Wharton is the name. Now these people at a farm up the road here on Cromwell put them out. And 100 years ago, this stone was recorded at the next house up the road here. And when we came here to the front door, and I said, that's belonged to Dead Roger and left it there. The name still lives on. It's Wharton's Grove above Mount Tulip. Do you know, after Cromwell put them out, the name is still there. Next one. The first thing we done on the Helsing's Constable Grave is we cut the ivy at the boat and left it for a year to lose it. And then when we're taken off immediately, we went around the Scotland and keep out the water. And the most amazing thing about it, the ivy never went into that wall. It should have been knocked, plenty of times to knock it, and it never did because it's so well built. That's what's there today.
The church at Newtown was probably built sometime in the very early 13th century. Records state that it was given to St. John's Priory in Kilkenny by William Marshall in the 1220s. It is likely that the church was built not long before this date. The church appears to have been built in 3 phases. The nave and original chancel was built in the opening decades of the 13th century, while a later rood screen and gallery was inserted in the 15th century. Not long afterwards, a residential tower was built over the gallery, obscuring the pillars and arches of the rood screen. Finally, several buttresses were added to support the north and south nave walls.
Now look up. That's a Roman design. And now they built it all out in timber first. They put the stone on top. They wedged the stone to weigh the timber 800 years ago. Now there's no steel, there's no concrete, there's nothing in that. It's just balanced and wedged. And the door here. Would you stand into the door, my good man? There's 2 reasons for the size of the door now. Number one, we've grown a lot, but it's actually about the fence. So if you've been attacked, they can only come in one at a time, hands by their sides, head down. And the priest will be on the steps waiting for them. Another little bit. Now one man could hold an army there, no problem. And all the castles in Ireland except one is built clockwise, the stairs. Reason being that the guy coming down the stairs has plenty of room to use his right hand. The guy from up the stairs against the wall, he can't do anything. You know, like all about protection. Like, and could you imagine putting your head there without your hands and a man waiting for you to clobber you? You wouldn't be putting it back the second time. You know, and the stairs, I was in Bunratty there actually last summer. And it's amazing, the guy's right hand is right in the corner altogether. And the guy above him beats him. Right, we're going on over it. Well, again, I'll read after the lot on it. Well, who's going to read it out?
Here lieth the body of John Delaney, who departed this life October 16th, 1774, aged 49 years.
Now, the story is there, with the writing. Now, do you see the size of the H? Do you see the little Y there for body? D is here, and D is here for departed. Now, that's not a mistake. That's 100 years before the first dictionary was written. So, the school teacher here spelled it one way. The guy who spell it another way. The story is there and the spelling doesn't matter. Now, do you see the cross and the heart under it? What that's about there is if you had God in your head is rolling, or something in your head every second, but if it's in your heart, it's always there. There's a lot on that little stone now. Now, there's the oldest date we have on a stone, 1623. And it's in Latin, Den is the name. Now, to Den and Friend that are back St. Nicholas here, this is Den. But the Dens lived in a castle about a mile down the river here, and who was here in town was King John. The guy Robert Hunter fight with, and he went down to Den. Den hadn't paid his taxes. And the king had one plan for this fella, and that one. But Den was an awful chancellor. If there was ever a chancellor, Den was a chancellor, because when he realised the king was coming down from him and he knew the plan, he didn't run or he didn't panic, he didn't do anything like that. But what he did do was he put out a heap of drink on the road for him, and he got all the drink he could into him. Came into the castle and he got more drink into him. And eventually when they were properly drunk, they sat down to the food, and right in front of the king, they lifted the cover off the food. He was Den's head on the table. Job done, everything was grand, they were eating away, no problem at all, until Den sneezed. He was sitting under the table, head up to a hole in the table. Well, the king got such a laugh at him, he said, "You can keep your head if you pay your tax." Would you pay now? Right, we're going all of it. Now, that's in folklore, that story. It's not in the records, but it's quite strong in folklore. Now, when he had to St. Nicholas, now, if you know the way priests are dressed in Mass, see the long garment, the two toes sticking out. The chasmen, they all wear that same Mass, but see the two hands, the thumbs run together, he's giving a blessing. On the two heads on his shoulder, the two knights are brought him back here, Den and Frame. Now, the bottom line on this man, he was a Turk. He was born in Turkey in the 2nd century. He died in the 3rd century. His parents died when he was a very young baby and left him immensely wealthy. And he gave his life and his money to the poor. And he knew the 3 balls that hang inside a pawn shop. That's symbol of the 3 brass balls goes back to this man. And what that's about is the time he was bishop in Mira in Turkey, a girl couldn't marry without a dowry. So he went on one day with 3 bags of gold for $3. So they could marry, you know, this is a street here. Now, the first house he came to, he just threw a bag of gold in the door for her and kept going. The second house, he threw it in the window, kept going. But when he got to the 3rd house, it was locked up, and he dropped it down the chimney. Now, when he died in, he was buried in Mira in Turkey, and that's recorded as a deserted tomb. Reason being, the Muslim and the Christian, they were always fighting, they still are. So it was very important that the Muslims would not get their hands on this. So they dug up the body and moved it to Bari initially, and then they moved it again. But then, in the 12th century, then the Crusaders brought him back here. Now, the reason they came to here was, this was a further away part of the world. America wasn't found, so there was no further. It's as far inland as they could go, and if the Muslim got here, he'd be below the abbey looking for it, and he had to see the plain side. And that is recorded on the first order of the map was ever drawn of Ireland. That is recorded as St. Nicholas Church. And I have no doubt that that is something they are very, very special. That we just don't know. Now this one here, this is the marker cross on that stood below this down here. And that stood into that. Now this is the story I particularly like. It brings out the intelligence of people. It's a millstone. Now the value of a millstone is the value of a house. And they produced all these at the coast. They were down on the rock and they marked out what they wanted. They drilled holes around it. They drilled in under it. They drove in dry wooden oak pegs into the holes. The tide came and went. The timber swelled up to that. Was that clever? That's a simple, you know, they had nothing on what they could do. But then when they took out that one, they found a flaw in it. So it was never polished, it was never used. They only used it as a second for a base for that. So now we go down the town. Now East Street came down along here, down the Holloway. They were known as Holloways. Like when we say I saw him going down the street, they saw him going down the Holloway. Like it had to be a hollow because there was a drainage, there was everything. I'd imagine the streets were quite clean in it because everyone were growing their own vegetables. So if a horse strutted on the road, I'd be out with my shovel before you'd have it gone. And I said for that reason, the Holloways were probably quite clean. You know, and I took the water, the rainwater, everything was on the street. And I went down along there, came around that tree there, and out between the two lines of stones there into the marketplace just over the hill here.
Aerial survey in LiDAR has revealed the traces of numerous burgage plots and field boundaries. These burgage plots were given to individuals in return for an annual rent of usually 1 shilling, as well as service at the Lord's Court and Mills. This is a close-up of Newtown on the 19th century Ordnance Survey 6-inch map, and it shows that at the time Although the town was abandoned, the traces of the town were visible for the surveyors. They traced out the streets, the street pattern, the burgage plots, and the remains of whatever houses were still visible at the time. All that remains of these houses now are these piles of stones. In the mid-19th century, locals were given permission to grow potatoes on the land under the condition that they removed the stones from the houses. So they piled the stones up just enough so that they have space and soil depth to grow their potatoes. This is the remains of the northwest corner of a late medieval tower house which stood on the street, the east-west street of Newtown Jerpoint. The east-west street bent around the south side of this building, curving northwards, then curving back east, where it intersected with the north-south long street at the probable location of the marketplace, and that's where we'll meet Joe again now.
Now, this is the marketplace here. This is where all the action was. Now, do you see the stones there on the left-hand side of the stone above it? That's where East West Street came into the marketplace there. That's the marketplace. Could you imagine this here on a market day with a ship in? That the action of the people living there.
This is also the likely location of the market cross that we were introduced to above in the graveyard earlier on. Here we can just about make out another narrow holloway running from the intersection of the streets from the marketplace down towards the river Argyll, which is a tributary of the River Nore. Just at the banks of the river, at the end of the path, we can see the ruins of a medieval flour mill. This is where the locals of Newtown would have taken their grain to be processed into flour. Another mill of the same sort can be seen on the banks of the river just a couple of, maybe 100 meters to the north of this one. We'll just wrap up with a photograph of the location of where the bridge crossing the River Nore once stood in the Middle Ages, up until the possibly up until the mid 18th century. In fact, the town itself gets its name, as Joe mentioned earlier on, from the presence of the bridge, meaning Nor, and pond or pont meaning bridge, which eventually morphed into Jerry Pond and then Jerpoint. And yeah, that's really it. So thanks a lot for watching and enjoy your Heritage Week.